Hi, everybody. It's Joe Cioffi here as we take a look at Hurricane Irma as it can strengthen quite a bit overnight into
Hi,
this
everybody.
morning.
It's Joe Cioffi here.
I know the audio is working, so that's a good thing. Okay, good. So you can see that the eye is very well developed here, moving to the west-southwest. We have hurricane warnings up now for the Leeward Islands, and we also have hurricane watches up for the U.S. and British Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. And for areas west of there, the risk for the Bahamas is increasing, as well as the risk for perhaps the north coast of Hispaniola and for Cuba, based on the overnight model runs. We're getting the new model runs now. The GFS has begun, and we'll have some of it at the end of this. So I'm going to switch over now. The video should be just about ready to go. We'll be in a few seconds. The trend overnight in terms of the motion continues to be a little bit further to the south of what the models were indicating, not by much, but just a little bit. So there's been these subtle southward shifts and westward shifts in the overall track. I think right now I'm going to cautiously say that while the east coast of the United States remains at risk, the risk north of, say, Chesapeake, from Chesapeake Bay northward, has diminished a little, somewhat. The risk from Virginia Beach, but particularly North Carolina down to Florida, including the Keys, I think has increased. I think especially as you go further south. The range of the models in the long range has kind of narrowed. The European, which flipped yesterday from the coast to out to sea, flipped back, and I will explain why with regards to what's going on in the upper air. So many players here makes it, of course, always a challenge with regards to how this is all going to play. So. Let's get to the weather portion of this, and in the meantime, I'll chat with you guys, and then we'll come back at the end to wrap it up. We're looking at major Hurricane Irma as it continues to move to the west-southwest, and during the night, we've seen some rapid strengthening, and that looks like it's continuing during the morning hours. The pressure went from 960 millibars down to 947, and I believe the last pressure that we have on here is 942. There's an Air Force reconnaissance aircraft heading into this right now. You can see how well defined the eye has become, and you can still see that west-southwest motion continuing. We are getting a little further south of 17 degrees north, getting closer to 16.5 degrees north, and this is important because the fact that that southern motion has put the Leeward Islands at risk, and hurricane warnings are now up for the northern Leeward Islands, and we have a hurricane watch up for Puerto Rico and the U.S. and British Virgin Islands. Doesn't look like there's that much shear going on. The hurricane looks symmetrical. This, I think, has a chance to become a Category 4 hurricane before it approaches the leewards. Now, here's the wider view, and you can see the hurricane here. We have, by the way, this is a tropical wave that the Hurricane Center is forecasting a good chance that this is going to become a tropical depression or a tropical storm in the next several days, and the models show that as well. We also have low pressure in the southwest Gulf of Mexico producing showers and thunderstorms, and development here is possible. Conditions are marginally conducive for development, and the Hurricane Center is rating this a 40% chance. So we're going to be watching these two areas as well. This one in particular, even though I think if development does occur here, it looks to be slow to occur. And I don't believe that either of these systems are going to have, at least at this point, it doesn't look like either of these two systems will wind up having any real impact on Irma. But this hurricane is continuing to move right along. Here's the latest National Hurricane Center forecast. which was adjusted again a little bit further to the south, and you notice that it brings the hurricane almost right on shore to central Cuba. And at this point, I think it's fair to say that interests along in Florida and the Keys should start paying attention to this, because I think the risk is increasing for Irma to have some kind of an impact later in the long-range period over South Florida. And I would extend the risk up to take the whole Florida East Coast down to the Keys and maybe even into Southwest Florida, given what's been happening. Here's the overnight reconnaissance aircraft flight and the winds scale here at the bottom. The white barbs are winds of 96 to 113 knots, and you can see that there was quite an extensive area near the center of strong easterly winds of well over 100 knots, so that 120 mile an hour maximum sustained wind is justified. There's a new mission that is on the way there now, and it'll be investigating it in the next few hours, and we're going to be getting 6-hourly fixes from the recon. And the model guidance continues to shift southward. You can see this huge cluster now moving over the northern leewards, just north of the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, just north of Hispaniola, and then touching or crossing into central Cuba. And then you see that right turn, that sharp right turn. Every model run that we've had keeps shifting that right turn a little bit further to the west. And judging from what the overnight model runs did, I'm thinking that we can probably say at this point that for the mid-Atlantic and for the Northeast, the risk is still there, but the risk has lessened. And that's we'll wait for the afternoon run of model guidance to just kind of confirm that. But that's the way it appears at the moment, while the risk remains, I would say, from the Carolinas down through Florida and now extending down into the Keys. And this is why the GFS, among others, and also the European did the same thing. You can see it was a little further south. The core of the hurricane remains over the water for the most part, but these islands do get into at least tropical storm force winds, if not hurricane force. And then the GFS last night actually took the core of the hurricane over Cuba and then turned it sharply northward toward south over the Keys into southern Florida, more to the west side than to the east, and then straight north and doing that northwest and west hook. The further west it goes, the hook is going to occur south and west, further south and west on every run. And the reason why we're seeing that happen, and we're going to look at the upper air. I'll give you the wider view so you can see the whole North Atlantic. And there we go. Among all the players in here, and there are several, as we've been pointing out, we've got, this is for early Friday morning. You have the big ridge in the Atlantic, and you see how that ridge just kind of noses into this off the Florida coast, and that's keeping Irma on that westerly course so that the trough that's to the north does not exert any influence on it. It stays as a separate feature. That northern jet is blocked by that nose of the ridge, which has been stronger on every run as well. So we have high confidence in this. So it can't really recurve out if that's the case. Now there's this other disturbance, and you can see it here in the kink here. This system here, this shortwave trough that's in the northern plains, Dakotas and Montana, that drops southward and basically creates a little upper low here that forms over in western Tennessee, and that grabs it and then lifts it up to the northwest. You can see how that hook occurs. Now the European on the overnight run backed away from yesterday where it showed this, but yesterday it left that opening and took it out to the northeast. This is not the case on today's Europe, on the overnight European. The European does the same idea. It just does it a little bit further to the east. There's that nose of that ridge and the trough. The trough pulls out. European leaves a little bit more of that trough behind, so that probably is the reason why it takes that northward turn a little sooner and has it just off the east coast of Florida at this point. And here's that shortwave trough that's diving down and beginning to hook this around. That trough here in the northeast is lifting out. If it lifts out this, like the way the European is showing, it would miss Irma. And it doesn't appear that any hole is being created by any new tropical storm that's well northeast of the Leewards, indicated here on the upper air map. And you can see that the European does the same hook, but it does it further to the north. And as a result, it takes it in near Wilmington, North Carolina, and then hooks it back to the north and west. I think the model trends are clear, and they're getting clearer with every run. We'll see what the day run of the models, what they do. They should be, they're underway. We have the new GFS out for a short period. So let's see what the new GFS does. We have it out to 60 hours. So there's Irma here. Here are the leewards. I'll get the tighter Atlantic view, Western Atlantic view, so we can get close up. And you know what? I'm going to put the wind field on. And here we go. So it takes it, skims it over the northern Leeward Islands, keeps it at least here at this point, moving just north of the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. Here's the position. Let's take a look. It might be a shade further north on this run, just doing it from memory. But let me just we'll back it up. We'll go 2 runs back, and you can see this was the run from 2 runs ago. Last night's, which was a little further southwest, and it looks like this run is a shade further to the north. So we'll see what I've just got 2 new ones. So all right, folks, so we are having just some minor technical difficulties here, so just bear with me for 1 second. And looking at the new GFS run so far, and I have it out to 132 hours. It's a little bit further to the north, where last night's run took the core of the hurricane right over central Cuba. This one keeps the core just offshore. It's actually pretty close to the Hurricane Center's forecast. Also at the 132-hour mark, which is Saturday night, 8 p.m., the hurricane is due south of Miami by about 150 miles or so, still moving on a west-northwest course. So we don't see the sign of the northward turn, at least through Saturday night. I just want to quickly look from the night before. I mean, last night the actual low was sitting in central, the actual hurricane, the center of the hurricane was in central Cuba. The new run is along and just north of the north coast of central Cuba. So it's keeping it offshore throughout the period. If the core of the hurricane, if the bulk of the core of the hurricane remains offshore, then it's likely to maintain some strength. Just to clarify, we have warnings up for the Leeward Islands, the northern Leeward Islands. Check with the, in fact, I'll just do that now. Let me just manually pull it up. This way I give you the exact. So the northern Leeward Islands would be Antigua, Barbuda, Anguilla, Montserrat, St. Kitts, and Nevis. Watches are up for the British Virgin Islands. We have warnings up for Saba, St. I don't even know how to pronounce this, Eustatius, and St. Martin. And we have a hurricane warning that's for the Dutch side. The French side of St. Martin is under hurricane warning, and St. Bartholomew with a watch issued for the island of Guadeloupe. And again, the watches are up for the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and the surrounding islands. Barbados, which I think is too far south, but they've put up a tropical storm watch for the islands of Barbados and for Dominica. So those are the latest from the Hurricane Center. The lowest pressure on the advisory, 944 millibars, or 27.88 inches. If you have a home barometer, it's off the bottom of the scale, moving west-southwest at 14, top winds at 120 miles an hour. There's a plane going into this right now, so I'll just see how far along it's not. It's just now entering the western periphery of Irma, and we'll get the latest, the fix a little bit later on. One last check of the GFS. Okay, so now at this point, as we get into Sunday morning, it's beginning to make that northward hook, looking at the south to southeast coast of Florida. And the model is clustered within the model guidance that we saw overnight. It is to the east of where the European, to the west of where the European was. The European was a little bit further to the east. So again, at this point, I think we could say that certainly the risk for the Bahamas has increased. I think the risk for the Florida east coast and the Florida south coast has increased. And that risk extends up through coastal North Carolina. If you're north of there at the moment, even though I think there's still a risk, the risk based on the overnight models has diminished somewhat. Not completely out of the woods because there's still a lot of volatility in the upper air and a lot of things can happen going forward. So we're just going to continue to watch the situation as we go through the afternoon. I may be able to live stream this evening. So if I am able to do that, if I can get all the technical stuff set up, I will schedule it so you'll know, and we'll have all the latest information. And of course, many of you will be back from your Labor Day activities. Hopefully you're having a fun day or a day at the beach or the pool, depending on where you are. And we will go through this all over again. We'll have the whole set of afternoon models to look through. And just to get, again, as far as making any kind of decisions, you need to consult the National Hurricane Center's website, nhc.noaa.gov, or your local National Weather Service office, weather.gov, and then you can just kind of click on the map of your location. And also, of course, check with your local government officials regarding their recommendations on what you should or should not be doing at this stage of the game. Okay, so we'll talk to you folks later. Have a great day. And again, we'll probably try and schedule a live stream. If I get all the technical glitches put together, might be able to do a live stream this evening, probably I would say after 7 o'clock.